right now, one of the world's most productive uranium mines is just, well, sitting in absolute silence. It's completely paralyzed by a single broken pipe.
Yeah, it's wild.
Meanwhile, over in Sweden, politicians are quietly getting ready to flip this legislative switch that has kept massive domestic energy reserves locked away for decades.
Yeah.
And at the exact same time, in a secured hotel room in Doha, you've got diplomats arguing over 408 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. And that is a conversation that could, literally in an instant, rewrite the global price of nuclear fuel.
It's a remarkable convergence, honestly.
Yeah.
We're looking at a week where the brutal physical realities of mining are just colliding head-on with all these abstract complexities of global geopolitics.
Right. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to take the latest Uranium Unleashed report, specifically the weekly market forecast and supply watch for the week of July 13th through the 17th, 2026. And we're going to decode this massive pile of operational, legislative, and geopolitical events happening this exact week.
Which is a lot to unpack, to be fair.
It is a ton. But look, whether you're, prepping for a commodities strategy meeting or trying to understand the really volatile mechanics of energy markets, or maybe you're just insanely curious about how a minor mechanical failure in Canada somehow connects to high-stakes diplomacy in the Middle East, we are going to cut through the noise for you.
Absolutely. Because merely glancing at isolated headlines, it just won't help you understand the structural shifts happening right now.
Right.
You really have to look at how these distinct pieces interact, how they trigger one another.
Exactly. We want to give you the mechanisms and the aha moments you need to see the entire board.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Looking at the calendar for this highly specific 5-day window, it feels like there's this immense amount of pressure building up simultaneously across several continents.
Yeah, everywhere.
So what makes this exact week so structurally critical?
Well, primarily because this is an operational week that's wearing a geopolitical disguise, if that makes sense.
Okay, I like that. What do you mean?
I mean, we are dealing with two entirely different sets of logic driving the market, and they're both coming to a head right now. So on one side of the ledger, you have concrete physical constraints.
Right. Things you can actually touch.
Exactly. Like a broken component at a Canadian milling plant, causing heavy machinery to just sit idle. And then on the other side, you have these abstract diplomatic variables, like the U.S.-Iran nuclear technical talks that are currently underway in Doha.
It's just such a bizarre contrast. I was trying to visualize this market pressure earlier, and honestly, the spot price right now, it looks like a massive concrete dam where the water level is rising dangerously high behind the wall.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Yeah, because spot prices have been artificially held in this incredibly narrow $85 to $86 band since April. It's almost completely stagnant on the surface, but the pressure from supply constraints is clearly building underneath.
Oh, absolutely. The pressure is huge.
Right. So the question we need to figure out for you is, which of these two forces the physical supply chain breaking down or a geopolitical shock, which one is going to be the crack that finally breaks the dam?
And to figure out where that crack might form, we really have to start with the physical supply chain. We need to look at the biggest domino that just abruptly stopped falling.
Right. Let's focus on the Canadian bottleneck. So we're talking about Cameco's Cigar Lake mine in northern Saskatchewan.
A massive asset.
Huge. This is a Tier 1 asset. It produces roughly 18 million pounds of uranium annually.
Which is, just to put it in perspective, over 10% of the global primary mine supply.
Over 10%. But operations there were completely suspended on July 1st. And this is the part that sounds completely counterintuitive to me. It wasn't suspended because of a problem at the mine itself.
Right, exactly.
It was suspended because of a failed expansion joint in the sulfuric acid plant at Orano's adjacent McClean Lake mill.
Yeah. A single component failure at a downstream processing facility brings 10% of the world's primary supply to a grinding halt. It's crazy.
Okay, I have to pause you there, because for anyone who isn't a mechanical engineer, an expansion joint sounds like, I don't know, a minor piece of plumbing under a kitchen sink.
Right.
What exactly does this part do, and why does its failure paralyze a facility of this scale?
Well, it's essentially a flexible connector in a piping system. When you're moving highly concentrated sulfuric acid, the pipes undergo extreme temperature fluctuations, right? So the metal expands and contracts.
Oh, okay. So it's literally expanding with the heat.
Exactly. And without a specialized expansion joint to absorb that thermal movement, the rigid pipes would literally tear themselves apart.
Wow.
Yeah, you simply cannot safely operate an acid plant if the infrastructure handling corrosive chemicals is compromised. It's a massive safety hazard.
Okay, so the acid plant is down. That makes total sense. But I still need to push back on the broader logic here, just from a layman's perspective. If it's just an acid plant at the milling facility that's broken, why on earth is the actual mine completely shut down?
That's the logical question. Yeah.
Like, why not just keep digging the ore out of the ground, pile it up in a secure parking lot or something, and process it whenever the mill is fixed?
What's fascinating here is the sheer physics and logistics of high-grade uranium. You absolutely cannot just pile this stuff up in a parking lot.
Because of the radiation.
Precisely. Cigar Lake is renowned for having exceptionally high-grade ore. I mean, sometimes hitting 20% concentrations. At that level of purity, the rock is highly radioactive.
Oh, wow. 20% is that high?
Oh, it's incredibly high. It requires specialized, heavily shielded handling. Usually it's suspended in a slurry and moved through pipes or stored in purpose-built underground pools to contain the radiation.
Ah, okay. So they literally do not have the physical footprint to store it safely if the downstream line stops.
Exactly. The mine has very limited ore storage capacity. Because the adjacent McClean Lake mill lacks the sulfuric acid required to, chemically leach the uranium out of the rock, the mill stops taking new deliveries.
And it just backs up.
Right. Once that happens, Cigar Lake's specialized storage fills up almost instantly. They run out of safe places to put the radioactive rock. So they have no choice but to turn off the mining machines.
It's like grounding an entire fleet of 747s because the truck that delivers the airplane food has a flat tire.
Actually, that's a pretty good way to think about it.
The system is so tightly optimized that a single point of failure cascades backward instantly. So what's the actual timeline here? Because July 1st was 12 days ago.
Well, fortunately, there were no injuries when the joint failed. Cameco initially estimated that the restart would take about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And 2 weeks from July 1st puts that target window exactly on this week, July 13th to the 15th.
Wow, right now.
Right now, Orano has been scrambling to fix the acid plant while also trying to truck in alternative acid supplies from other sources just while they wait for replacement parts.
So we are sitting right in the middle of that critical window. Walk me through the market arithmetic here. What happens if they successfully turn the machines back on tomorrow versus if they have to announce a delay?
Well, if the restart happens this week, it's largely a non-event for Cameco's second quarter guidance, which they're scheduled to release on July 30th.
Right.
It actually reinforces a bullish narrative for Canada. It proves their supply chain is highly disciplined, resilient, and capable of managing technical failures quickly.
But what if they miss the window? Like, what if they cross that 3-week mark?
Then the narrative dramatically shifts. It transforms into the first material unplanned supply disruption of a Tier 1 mine in 2026.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Spot buyers, the utilities and financial funds who have been sitting quietly behind that dam we talked about since April, they will suddenly face a tangible reduction in available physical pounds.
Right, because there's just physically less material out there.
Exactly. Cameco would likely have to acknowledge a potential negative impact on their 2026 production guidance. That is the exact kind of physical catalyst that could shatter that $85 price ceiling and force spot prices aggressively upward.
So Canada is really exposing the physical fragility of the current highly concentrated supply chain.
Very much so.
And that vulnerability is exactly why Western buyers are getting so desperate for secure domestic alternatives, which explains why what is happening in Europe this week is so urgent.
Yes.
So let's pivot to Sweden, because if Canada is showing us the vulnerabilities of current supply, Europe is about to show us the future of new supply.
It really is a generational shift in European energy policy, and it takes legal effect this Wednesday, July 15th.
Right. And to give you some context on why Wednesday is so monumental, we have to look at Swedish law. Because for decades, uranium mines in Sweden were legally classified as nuclear facilities. And this was a massive hurdle because it granted local municipalities absolute veto power over any project. Like, a local town council could effectively block a multi-billion-dollar national security asset.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. But under this new amendment to the Nuclear Activities Act, uranium mines are being reclassified as conventional mineral operations. The municipal veto is entirely stripped away.
Which fundamentally alters the risk profile for investors and mining companies.
But let me ask you the practical question. Lawmakers signing papers in Stockholm doesn't magically put a mining drill in the ground in northern Sweden, right?
No, definitely not.
So who actually holds the rights to this land? And are we going to see Swedish uranium heading the market anytime soon? Or is this just a lot of bureaucratic paper shuffling?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to ground ourselves in geological reality first. First production from Sweden is years away. No one is pulling finished uranium out of the ground next month.
Right, that takes time.
A lot of time. But Wednesday is historically significant because it shifts European domestic supply from a political aspiration, like a dream, to a permittable reality.
Okay, so who are the companies standing at the starting line here?
There are two major players holding the keys. You have Aura Energy, which holds the Hegon deposit. That site holds an estimated 800 million pounds of uranium resources, alongside valuable byproducts like potash and vanadium.
Wow, okay.
And then you have District Metals, which controls the Viken property, boasting an inferred resource of 1.5 billion pounds. Both of these massive deposits are located in Jumbland.
Wait, I want to make sure I'm doing the math right here. District Metals has 1.5 billion pounds, and Aura has 800 million. We just established that Cigar Lake, one of the biggest active mines on Earth, produces 18 million pounds a year.
Yep.
So we are talking about decades, maybe a century of global supply just sitting undisturbed beneath the Swedish soil.
The scale of the resource is staggering. It really is.
Right.
Which is why the signal you need to watch for this week isn't the deployment of heavy mining equipment. It's corporate paperwork.
Paperwork.
Yeah. Will Aura Energy or District Metals immediately file formal permitting applications or announce accelerated development timelines under this new legal framework?
Because if they move immediately, it proves they already had the capital and the engineering ready, and they were literally just waiting for the legal gate to open.
Precisely. It tells the market that the management teams are aggressive and funded. If they stay quiet, the legislative unlock is real. But the actual execution timeline remains a massive question mark for the market.
And we shouldn't view this Swedish unlock in a vacuum either. The report mentions that the Nuclear Energy Institute, the NEI, is reportedly holding a major conference in Knoxville, Tennessee, this exact same week.
Right.
So you have utility procurement executives and policymakers drinking coffee in the hallways, directly discussing how to eventually secure contracts for all this future Western-friendly uranium.
That's the crucial overlap. While the NEI conference agenda hasn't been, independently verified by us, industry gatherings of this scale are historically where the seeds of informal term contracting are planted.
Oh, absolutely.
You have utility executives looking at Canada experiencing an acid plant bottleneck. They're looking at Sweden suddenly opening up billions of pounds of reserves, and they are intensely recalculating their long-term fuel needs.
It's just wild to think about how physical rocks in Saskatchewan and legal documents in Stockholm can totally dictate the energy grid. But here's where the dynamics shift entirely. Because the actual price of that rock might be decided by diplomats sitting in secured, air-conditioned rooms in the Middle East and West Africa.
That's very true.
So let's look at the geopolitical wildcards.
And it's important to state up front here, we are analyzing these diplomatic negotiations strictly through the lens of market mechanics, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We are impartially reporting on how these state-level negotiations could impact global supply and demand arithmetic without taking any political stances or endorsing any viewpoints from any side.
Exactly. We're looking for the catalyst, not the politics. So let's look at the biggest wild card from the report, which is the Doha talks. We are currently in week 4 of an 8-week U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiation window.
Right.
Vice President Vance is reportedly in Doha. The technical talks are zeroing in on a highly specific, very concerning number: 408 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, or HEU, enriched to 60% or more, currently sitting at the Fordo and Isfahan facilities.
This is universally recognized as the hardest unresolved technical item on the negotiating table right now.
Really?
Yeah. The talks are heavily focused on establishing future enrichment limits, securing a verified duration for an enrichment pause, and crucially outlining a dilution schedule for that specific stockpile of 60% HEU.
Okay, so for the listener who isn't a nuclear inspector, why is the 60% enrichment level so terrifying to global markets? Why does this specific stockpile matter so much?
Because uranium enriched to 60% is a hair's breadth away from weapons-grade material, which is roughly 90%.
Oh, wow. So it's that close.
Yes. The technical effort required to go from natural uranium to 60% is immense. It takes a lot of work. but the jump from 60 to 90 is relatively fast and easy. The physical threat of a stockpile hovering that close to weapons grade creates an enormous amount of tension in the Middle East.
And the market quantifies that tension as the geopolitical risk premium.
Yes, exactly. Currently, the spot price is sitting at $85.75 a pound. But the term price, which is the price utilities pay to lock in long-term, multi-year contracts, is sitting much higher, around $95 a pound.
Wow, that is nearly a $10 spread between what you pay today and what you agree to pay in the future.
And a large portion of today's spot price is supported by that geopolitical risk premium. The market is pricing in the persistent threat of a broader conflict, disrupting global shipping or energy markets.
That makes total sense.
Right. So the negotiations are focusing on a dilution schedule, which essentially means taking that dangerous 60% uranium and chemically blending it with natural or low-enriched uranium until the grade drifts back down to a level that's only suitable for civilian power plants.
So if a partial Iran deal is announced this week, like even just a framework agreeing to IAEA-supervised dilution and an enrichment pause, the immediate physical threat drops. And if the threat drops, that geopolitical risk premium just vanishes from the spot price.
Exactly. The report specifically notes that a credible partial deal could push the spot price down toward the low 80s.
Wow.
Keep in mind, Iran's domestic uranium production is completely immaterial to global supply. They do not export uranium to Western utilities.
Right.
But the sentiment of a geopolitical de-escalation pulls the psychological floor down. But, and this is the absolute key insight for you as an observer, if the spot price dips on diplomatic news, you really must watch how the term price reacts.
Why? Why is the term price the ultimate truth teller in this scenario?
Because if the spot price drops to the low 80s, purely on a diplomatic headline, but utility companies continue to sign long-term contracts at $95, it proves that the structural supply deficit is mathematically real.
Oh, I see.
It proves that utility executives in Knoxville are looking past the temporary relief of a Middle East deal and acknowledging that there simply isn't enough physical uranium being mined to meet future demand. It isolates the math from the emotion.
That is a brilliant distinction. The spot price reacts to the emotion of the headline, but the term price reacts to the cold math of the supply chain.
Exactly.
And speaking of supply chains being held hostage by diplomacy, the Middle East isn't the only place where negotiations are freezing the market right now. Let's look at the Niger-Benin corridor in West Africa.
This is a deeply complex, multi-layered logistical nightmare.
Yeah, I'll lay out the geography and the facts here. Niger is a massive uranium producer, but they are a landlocked country. Historically, they export their uranium south through Benin to reach the ocean ports at Cotonou.
Right.
But an expert committee was established on June 2nd, given a 15-day mandate to figure out how to reopen the Cotonou export route, which has been closed due to intense political friction since the junta took power in 2023. That 15-day deadline has come and gone. Niger's interior minister went to Cotonou on June 19th for talks. Right now, there are 3 parallel crises happening in Niger.
Right. First, you have the closed corridor itself.
Yeah.
Without access to the Benin ports, Niger has no economically viable way to get bulk uranium to global markets. It's just stuck.
Yeah, and second, you have the junior mining companies trying to survive this. GoviEx operates the Matahuela project there. This is a massive 100 million pound deposit with a post-tax net present value of nearly $400 million.
Yeah.
But they're currently trapped in a 6-month arbitration pause, desperately tricked to negotiate a workable operating framework with the junta.
And third, you have the international legal battle. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, or ICSID, issued a provisional ruling that essentially prohibits Niger from legally selling uranium from the existing Somer mine.
And this brings us to yellowcake, because the report mentions there are roughly 1,800 tons of yellowcake just sitting there. For clarity, yellowcake isn't raw rock, but it isn't finished reactor fuel either, right?
Correct. Yellowcake is milled uranium oxide powder. It's been extracted from the ore, processed, and packed into specialized steel drums. It is a crucial intermediate product that gets shipped globally to be enriched.
Okay.
So you have almost 2,000 tons of processed, highly valuable material packed in drums, baking in the Nigerian sun, legally frozen in place by international arbitration, and physically blocked by a closed border.
So what happens if these diplomatic talks actually succeed and they announce the reopening of the Cotonou corridor this week?
It acts as a massive catalyst. A formal reopening framework would be the first constructive logistical news out of Niger in over 2 years. It radically alters the operational feasibility for companies like Global Atomic, which holds the DASA project and relies entirely on that export route to get their future product to market.
Even with the ICSID ruling still legally freezing the SOMAR drums.
Yes, because reopening the border changes the long-term mathematical calculus for future supply. The market isn't just pricing in what's sitting in drums today, it's pricing in the viability of mines operating 10 years from now.
Right.
If the corridor opens, the future looks viable, even if the existing material is tied up in court. But if the talks stall, the uranium remains locked, which is the baseline reality the market is already suffocating under.
It's staggering when you step back and look at the sheer scale of the mechanics at play in this single 5-day window. We have a Tier 1 Canadian mine paralyzed by an acid pipe, creating immediate physical scarcity. We have a generational legal shift in Sweden, stripping away local vetoes to unlock billions of pounds of long-term resources. And we have high-stakes nuclear diplomacy in Doha and logistical standoffs in West Africa that could redefine the geopolitical risk premium literally overnight.
It perfectly illustrates why relying solely on a commodity's ticker price is just a fundamental mistake.
You have to understand the why and the how, knowing that an expansion joint failure in Saskatchewan forces an ore storage crisis, which panics spot buyers, or knowing that diluting 60% uranium in Iran drops a geopolitical risk premium while the long-term math remains unbroken. That is what makes you a vastly better thinker and investor. You aren't just reacting to the numbers, you're anticipating the mechanics driving them.
Absolutely. And that understanding leads us to one final crucial concept I want to leave you with today. We spent this deep dive detailing supply chaos, fragile infrastructure, and political tension. But consider the current state of the buyers for a second.
Okay.
For months, the uranium market has been a patient market. It sat perfectly still, trapped behind that $85 dam, waiting for clarity.
They've been waiting for either the physical crack or the geopolitical crack.
Exactly. But underneath that forced patience is an enormous, surging wave of liquidity. Next week, on July 23rd, Kazatomprom, the state-owned producer in Kazakhstan and the world's largest uranium miner, hits its ex-dividend date.
Oh, wow.
They are paying out a dividend of 1,292 Kazakhstani tenge per share. That represents a staggering 75% of their free cash flow.
Wait, so they are about to dump an ocean of cash straight back into the hands of investors and institutions who operate in this specific sector?
Precisely. So I want you to consider the ultimate contrast here. What happens when a market is this deeply patient and suddenly this flush with fresh cash liquidity, but is simultaneously starved of new, secure physical supply?
Oh, man.
If the Cigar Lake disruption continues past the 3-week mark, or if the Doha talks collapse and the risk premium spikes again, what happens when a patient, cash-rich market suddenly realizes the dam is breaking and it has to aggressively scramble for physical rock? The transition from patience to panic in commodities is rarely a slow, gentle curve.
Yeah.
It is almost always a violent vertical line.
That is a phenomenal thought to chew on. A violently patient market suddenly handed a massive influx of cash, staring down structural supply disruptions on 3 different continents. We will be watching the Canadian repair crews, the Swedish legislators, and the diplomats incredibly closely as this week unfolds. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden mechanics driving the global energy transition. Keep asking how things work, keep looking past the surface level headlines, and as always, stay curious.